This woman spent 27 years in prison for a dream. She had a dream, a haunting dream, one filled with fear, blood, and shadows. She was in a hospital bed when she whispered it to a therapist. She never imagined that dream would become her reality, a reality that stole 27 years of her life. Her name was Kathy Woods. In 1979, Kathy was 29 years old, living in Reno, Nevada, struggling with mental illness. She checked herself into a psychiatric hospital in Louisiana. She kept a journal. She spoke in fragments. She talked about vivid nightmares. One of those nightmares sounded eerily familiar to someone listening. A nurse reported Kathy's dream to authorities. That dream, she claimed, matched details of a cold case murder that happened years earlier. The 1976 killing of 19-year-old Michelle Mitchell, a nursing student who was found dead in a garage near the University of Nevada. Michelle had been bound with baling wire and her throat was slit. The crime scene was horrifying. There were no suspects, no fingerprints, no motive. The trail had long gone cold. But Kathy's dream, vague and disjointed, caught the attention of detectives in Reno. They flew out to Louisiana and questioned her. She was heavily medicated, confused, and alone. They asked about the murder. She mumbled uncertain answers. At one point, she said, "Maybe I did it." That was enough. They arrested her. No physical evidence tied her to the scene. She had never met the victim. She didn't live in Nevada at the time of the crime. But the state built a case on her fragile mental state and her confused statements during therapy. During the trial, the prosecution leaned on her words, not confessions, but fragments pulled from therapy notes. They told the jury she had knowledge only the killer would know. They presented her as manipulative, dangerous, and deceptive. The defense couldn't present key psychiatric testimony. The judge ruled much of it inadmissible. The jury saw a mentally ill woman and a brutal crime. They put them together. Kathy Woods was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. She was transferred to a women's facility in Nevada. Days turned into months, months into years. She watched the world move on. She had no freedom, no family visits, no hope. She wrote letters no one answered. She filed appeals that were denied. She tried to forget the dream that destroyed her life. Then, in 2013, everything changed. A cold case unit decided to retest evidence from the 1976 crime scene. They found a cigarette, but old, dusty, and long ignored. For the first time, it was tested for DNA. The results did not match Kathy Woods. They matched a man named Rodney Halbauer, a convicted serial killer serving time in Oregon. He had committed multiple murders in the 1970s. He had a violent history. He had been in Reno during the time of Michelle Mitchell's murder. Kathy Woods had nothing to do with it. After 35 years of maintaining her innocence, Kathy was exonerated. She walked out of prison in 2015 after serving 27 years for a crime she didn't commit. She received a $3 million settlement. But there was no true justice. The officers who built the case against her weren't punished. The prosecutors never apologized. The system moved on. Kathy had to rebuild her life from scratch. She was 65 years old. She had no home, no career. She had missed decades of freedom, relationships, technology, and time. All because of a dream. All because someone decided her mental illness made her guilty. Her story is not just about wrongful conviction. It's about a system that listens to evidence only when it confirms a narrative, even if that narrative comes from a dream spoken in a hospital room. Kathy Wood spent 27 years in prison, not because she was guilty, but because she was vulnerable, because she was unheard, because someone decided her truth didn't matter. How many more like her are still locked away? How many are dismissed, disbelieved, and discarded? This is not justice. This is injustice in its most silent form, and it's still happening. He died in jail waiting for a trial that never happened. He was arrested, locked away, forgotten, and then he died. Not because he was found guilty, not because a jury convicted him, but because the system never gave him a chance. His name was Kalief Browder. At just 16 years old, Kalief was walking home from a party in the Bronx when police stopped him. A man had accused Kalief of stealing a backpack 2 weeks earlier. There was no evidence, no video, no fingerprints, no stolen items found, just a vague accusation and a system looking for someone to blame. Khalif was arrested on the spot. His family couldn't afford the $3,000 bail. So Khalif was sent to Rikers Island, one of the most violent jails in America, while he waited for his day in court. That day never came. He spent 3 years at Rikers. 2 of those years were in solitary confinement. He was locked in a small, dark cell, alone, no clock, no sunlight, sometimes no human contact for 23 hours a day. He missed school. He missed birthdays. He missed life. He was beaten by guards, jumped by other inmates, starved, abused, forgotten, and through it all, he kept saying the same thing. I'm innocent. Every time he went to court, the prosecutor asked for more time. They said they weren't ready. They delayed, postponed, reset, again and again. His public defender barely spoke to him. The judge moved on to the next case. There was no trial, no conviction, but Khalif stayed behind bars. By the time the system admitted they had no case, 3 years later, Khalif had already been broken. He was released without apology. No charges, no trial, just a quiet exit into the world he no longer recognized. He tried to return to school. He tried to be normal, but the trauma never left him. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't trust. He couldn't forget the years that had been stolen from him. He attempted suicide multiple times. Then, in 2015, Khalif took his own life. He was 22 years old. He had never been found guilty of anything. He died waiting for justice that never came. His story shocked the world. But Khalif wasn't the only one. Across the U.S., thousands of people sit in jails right now, not because they've been convicted, but because they're poor, because they can't afford bail, because their cases are delayed, because they don't have powerful lawyers or media coverage. Khalif's death became a symbol, a mirror held up to a broken system, a reminder that sometimes justice delayed is justice denied. He never had his day in court, but we can give him something now, a voice, a story, a name that won't be erased. Say his name, share his story, and let the world know this cannot keep happening. A 14-year-old boy sat alone in a courtroom, feet barely touching the floor. His hands were cuffed. His eyes were wide. He didn't understand what was happening. He just knew his life was about to change forever. His name was Jacob Ellis. He had never held a weapon. He had never been in trouble at school. He played video games after class and helped his grandmother water her plants. But now, he was being accused of murder. The crime happened on a humid summer night in a small town in Georgia. Charles McKinley, a 42-year-old store clerk, was shot in the alley behind a liquor store. There were no witnesses, no surveillance footage, no DNA, no murder weapon. What the police did find: a teenager who lived 2 streets away, Jacob. They brought him in for questioning. He was alone. No lawyer, no parent, no guardian. The interrogation lasted hours. They asked the same questions over and over again. Jacob cried. He begged to go home. He denied everything. Still, the officers wrote in their report that Jacob seemed nervous, that he fit the profile. That was all they had. No fingerprints at the scene, no gunpowder residue, no physical evidence, no confession, just a scared kid and a system looking for someone to blame. At the trial, the prosecution had no direct link between Jacob and the crime, but they had a jailhouse informant, a man facing 20 years for armed robbery. He claimed that Jacob admitted the murder during transport. No one else heard this. The man later recanted, saying he was pressured to lie in exchange for a lighter sentence. But by then, it didn't matter. The judge allowed the testimony. The jury was shown photos of the victim. The prosecutor warned the court that Jacob was a danger to society. The defense asked for more time to review missing police records. Denied. The defense requested an expert to examine the trajectory of the bullet. Denied. The jury deliberated for just over an hour. The verdict: guilty. The sentence: life without the possibility of parole. Jacob was 14. His mother collapsed in the courtroom. His teacher wrote letters saying Jacob was incapable of violence. None of it mattered. Years passed. In prison, Jacob turned 15, then 16, then 18. He watched other inmates come and go. He never had a visitor after his grandmother passed. His letters went unanswered. His appeals were denied. When a nonprofit legal group took interest in his case, they discovered something shocking. Critical pieces of evidence, a 911 call, early witness statements, and officer body cam footage were never submitted in court. They filed a motion to reopen the case. The judge denied it. Again, today, Jacob is 31. He's been in prison longer than he was free. He still claims he's innocent. There's still no fingerprints, still no weapon, still no motive, still no evidence. Just a boy who became a scapegoat. Just a system that refused to admit it was wrong. How many more sit behind bars like Jacob, forgotten by time, punished not for what they did, but for where they lived, how they looked, or the fear they caused in someone's mind? This isn't justice. This is injustice. And it happens every day.